Hello ladies and gentlemen, Trippy aka back again from the C++ tutorial, and today we're going to go over it a little more in depth in functions and parameters and default parameters really quickly as well. So the reason why you have functions is so that you can split your program into nice little pieces. Now, what's the point of splitting up your program into nice little pieces when all of it's going to get dumped in the main later on? Well, let's say that the game is the main, obviously. And then every time that your character does an attack, it follows a certain thing. So when you attack, you cause damage. Well, that's a function. An attack is a type of function that the character has. Now if you're fighting a boss, the boss could attack, it could defend, and it could regenerate health. Well, squishing all that information into the main would cause a headache for you, the programmer, and yeah, pretty much that's it. Well, also the computer or the game, because you have to reiterate that program over and over again. Literally, you would have to sit there and retype every little thing over and over again if you wanted to call the function or that event. Now, instead of calling that event 5 separate times, you could make it once and only once outside the main, and then call it just by calling the name of the function as many times as you want. So that gives you a lot of flow. Now, C++ is a structured or procedural programming language with object-oriented structure or ability. So the most common and most basic thing is to do structured programming, flow programming, as you'll see in a minute. We're going to make a basic calculator that will return the area and volume of a shape. Well, it's going to be a basic rectangle because that's easy to do. So int x, int y. I have my data type int because we're going to return a sum value. Then it's named find area, then int x and int y. These are called arguments within the parameters section of your function. You can have as many arguments as you want. You can even have default arguments, which I'll show you in a little bit. So in order to multiply these together, we need to make a third called sum equals, well, int sum, and that'll equal to x times y because that's the area. Then in order to return the value of sum, we just do return sum. The reason why we're using int and not void is because we're doing a calculation that we want to return a certain value. We could do void and just print it on the screen, but then again, that's only text. You can't really take the sum of one and then the sum of another and combine it, because you can't do that with strings. I mean, you could concatenate, which means put strings together, but you can't really do a calculation. So return sum. Now we will make a second one called find area. Now area has int x, int y, and int z, and then same thing, int sum equals x times y times z, and you return the sum of that. Now many of you are probably thinking, oh, why do we have x and y here, then x and y here, then two different sums? Isn't the computer going to get, kind of confused? No, the computer's not going to get confused because, as I explained before, local variables stay within the function. Functions are greedy. Whatever they have. And they're not that greedy where they want more, but if it's out there, then they'll take it like a global variable. So you could spam as many arguments and stuff as you want within these functions or variables, called the same thing, but it's not going to override different functions. Now, it's not technically good practice to name a lot of the arguments or variables same thing in different functions, because when you see an error called int sum, you don't know where it is. Now thankfully the IDE will tell you what line, so that makes it a lot easier. So you have your int x and your int y, return to sum, and sum is multiplied. Now before we could do a calculation, we have to prototype it. So int find area, int x, int y, then int find volume, and I just did, there we go, find vol, int x, int y, int z. Now, the reason for parameters is that once you make a function and you pass it into the parentheses, you don't have to reiterate the actual variable. So int x and int y, the computer is going to come by and say, okay, you have two variables, here you have three variables, and they're equal to sum. That's why in my body I did not need to iterate the actual variable again. So that makes programming a little bit easier, a lot easier actually. So now in order to print on the screen, we have to see out our function, because before we always had to print it out on the screen, and we want to see the actual number on the screen, so we have to print it out. So in order to call the function, we do find area, and then integer x would be 3 and then 5. Should give us 15. Then see out, find volume, which will just do a total of 8. So let me end the line here so it's not mixed together. Print out on the screen, and I have an error message saying find vol was not declared in scope. Find vol. There we go. There we go. We get 15 and 8. Cool. Now, what if you accidentally, or the user accidentally does not put any information? Well, you're going to get an error. The way to overcome that is to do default parameters. And by doing default parameters, you could ensure that the computer will not get a headache, because it's just going to use those defaults. See? 1 times 1 equals 1 indeed, with nothing here. Now, whenever you work with parameters, think of you're placing eggs in a carton. Here's one egg, here's another egg. See, this one has a total of 3 eggs. So, if you wanted, you can make all of these as default parameters, and that'll be 2, and then this will be 3. And there's an error. Well, that's because it goes from left to right. You can't really fight it, but it only fills in where it is where it actually is. So right now, 3 is the first one. 3 times 1 equals 3. 2 times 1 times 1 equals 2 still. But what if this was 3? It's 6. So that's how basic functions work, and that's how parameters work, and arguments, and even default arguments. So it's just good practice. Now, what if you wanted user input? Well, you could obviously go ahead and take this out. Let's say integer a, int b, int c, int d, int e. Now, there's a reason for this. We're going to get 5 different user inputs here and here, and every time that the user inputs, we're going to get information. Now, usually, if you were to find the area and the volume of one specific thing, you would use those 3. Let's say a rectangular prism. So we're just going to do basic cn a, cn b, then cn c. Then we're going to print on the screen whatever the user inputs. So find area, whoops, a and b, and then see out, find area, a, b, c. Now, what just happened was you made a, b, and c, and when you put it into the computer, it's going to load a and b, which are going to be integer values, then here's A, B, and C. Now, even though you're using the same 2 and the 2, it passed into the function, so now they're separate. You'll see in a second. Error message, because I iterated again. Vol. Again, find vol. Gotta practice keyboarding some more. So now if I enter, let's say, 2, 3, and 4, I get 62 for that big number. Let me, and L, 3, 2, 4. Okay, now I get 6 because 3 times 2 equals 6. Then 2 times 4 equals 8, multiplied by 3 equals 24. So that's how functions are awesome, and that's how they work. You could always make up another type of integer value or variable and pass it in. Later on, when we talk about pointers, we're going to be passing into reference, and it's going to kind of clean up because, I mean, right now I haven't really gone over memory management, but I'll go over that shortly after the next few tutorials, I promise. And for now, that is functions.